Hey everyone, this is Mike Del Preti, and you're listening to Context, the podcast where I'm now traveling around the world talking to industry leaders about what's changing in the world of real estate tech. I'm here with Lisa Farrar, the COO of Hemnet, which is Sweden's leading real estate portal. Hi Lisa, how are you?
Hi Mike, I'm great. Welcome to Stockholm.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here. I've met so many great people and done so many great things, and I'm really happy to be here. So I'm excited to chat with you. And before we jump into it, let me ask you a question. How do you typically start your mornings?
Great question. This particular morning, I was woken up by my 12-year-old son who was nervous about he's got a religion test today. So this particular morning, I spent since 5 a.m. learning about Buddhism and Hinduism.
Oh, wow.
But that's not what I do every day. So I tried to go for a run, actually. Not a long one, 5Ks in the forest. And not every day, but every other day we finish with a quick swim. Well, it's more of a dip because it's yesterday was 6 degrees in the sea.
Ooh.
But a 5K run in the forest, a quick dip, and then heaps of coffee.
Wow. What kind of coffee do you like?
I like really strong black coffee.
Okay. That sounds like a very Swedish way to start the day.
It's something about, I spent 12 years in London, and when we moved back to Sweden, I mean, real estate-wise and quality of life-wise, you can get something very different. So we live just south of the city. It's about 20 minutes into the office, but you get forest and you get sea. And there's something about that run in the morning that just sounds strange, but it grinds you. So it reminds you how little you are. And I think bringing that with you into the rest of your day just is a great start.
That's good. I've heard similar advice, from these self-help gurus and whatnot, that the key is feeling small, right? How can you start your day feeling small, watching the sunrise, grounding with nature, realizing that you're just part of this larger ecosystem and the world doesn't necessarily revolve around you? So
yeah, that made my story sound really pretentious, perhaps. No. But there is something in what you're saying that I think is true. What we do every day really matters, and it means a lot to me. But really, what matters is other things, right? Like family and friends and nature and health. And so that's a good way to start.
So jumping into business and Hemnet, what's a big priority for you? What are you spending most of your time thinking about these days?
Yeah. So we're, as COO, I get to work really closely with our product team, sales team, business development, data, intelligence, so a lot of the business. And then I work very closely with our CTO, what our strategy is. And right now, I think we're trying to both focus on the short term, so the here and now, what's happening in the market and how do we need to respond to it. But we're also in the midst of setting our 3-year strategy. So we're trying to do that elevator pitch where you go from looking at strategy, looking at your 3-year horizon with everything that's going on in technology and how we can make sure that we stay ahead. And then you take the lift all the way down to the operations, where I must say my best day in the office is where I get to spend time with the team and really understand what problems are we solving, what impact are we having, and how can we make sure that we give the teams the best abilities to solve those problems.
When you think about strategy, what do you think the most important component of that is?
Clarity.
Clarity.
And I think clarity comes from as much saying what you're not going to do as it comes from saying what you are going to do.
Do you spend a lot of time in your role saying no?
I spend a lot of my time saying no. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think when I spend time with the teams, I have a firm belief in my leadership role that decisions should be made as far down in the organization as possible. That's when we get fast and nimble, and when we empower the teams to make decisions, that's when we win, right? And I think as a leader, you do that by having clarity on the strategy, having clarity on, we work with OKRs, so how can we make sure that all the teams know exactly with laser focus where we're heading and why? And by doing that, you can also trust the teams that they will make the right decisions on a daily basis.
Can you give a practical example of how you push clarity to the entire organization?
I think asking every day, what problems are you solving? What are you optimizing for? What outcome are you looking for? That helps a lot. And then reaffirming what are our OKRs, we're so focused on some core KPIs that we talk a lot about. You and I chatted a little bit beforehand, but audience is one of those. Together with NPS, I think that's a great indicator of how your business is doing. But then, of course, we also look at engagement. So how's our both core customers, but all the way up the funnel? What are they doing once they visit us? And I'm sure we'll get into a little bit about Hemnet and who we are, but we have the luxurious position of having a very large audience. So we have almost 2 million unique visitors a week. And in a country of 10 million, that's a very large portion of the Swedish population. So how can we make sure that we continue to deliver experiences and services that make them come back?
Who do you consider to be your customers?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm 18 months into the role. And I think that was one of my preconceptions coming into this role, that how complicated could it be, right? But it is. And I think it puts a lot of pressure on our teams, actually, our product teams, to understand our various customer groups. So we very roughly divide them into agents. And agents come in various customer groups as well. But we have the agents on the ground, and then we have the franchise owners, and we have the HQs. But agents as a group is our partners and very much a core customer of ours. Then we have the buyers and we have the sellers, if you simplify it. And I think, of course, me and my colleagues in the leadership team, but even more so, the folks building our products, they have to have all of these customers sitting on their shoulders firmly every day when they make decisions. And the way the teams focus is they usually have one core customer group that they build for. But unless they also always ask themselves, how are the other customer groups going to react and respond to what we're building, we are at the risk of building the wrong things. So it does put a lot of complexity in what we do and how we think.
At the end of the day, is there one customer group that wins?
I got that question in my interviews, actually, when I was interviewing for this role from one of our board members. And my response then, I think is still my response today, I think our buyers of any kind of two-sided or three-sided marketplace, if we lose audience, and I think our audience is a lot driven by the buyers, then that's a slippery slope. So if I had to choose, and I don't think we have the luxury of being able to choose, but if I had to, I would still say buyers.
Sure. I've interviewed a pair of folks from Zillow on the podcast in the past, Jeremy and Jeremy, the two Jeremys. And I forget who, but I asked them the same question. You know, in Zillow, the top portal in the States, their answer was the same, right? There's customer groups, but at the end of the day, the consumer is our North Star, and that's typically the buyer. So if we default and make a decision that's good for the consumers, then we can't lose, right? That's always the right thing. Do you agree with that?
I think that's simplifying it too much. I'd love if our world was that simple, but I think when you're in the midst of it, and our histories, we come from an industry initiative. So we were started by the agencies in 1998, so it's a fair way back in time. But we still consider the agents to be our super close partners, and we have to make them part of the equation in every decision we make. So I wish it was that simple, but I don't think it is.
I'm not sure if you have an opinion on this or not, but that's interesting. So Hemnet started out as a real estate agent owned portal, which is similar to other markets around the world, but then it was sold. Why was it sold? Wouldn't the agents realize like this incredible asset or value they have and want to keep control of that?
I wasn't here at the time, so
Right.
I'm not sure I can give the history a good enough review of it. But I think the agents did something amazing back in 1998. And I think what made them start Hemnet was to build an alternative to the expensive paper advertising that they were doing. And they did that successfully for years. And at the time, it was free to advertise on Hemnet. And then by putting some very clear parameters around how we can operate and what we can do, they felt, I imagine, secure enough that they could make Hemnet a more commercial entity. And that was done in a couple of exits over the years. So today we are a commercial business that is listed on the Stockholm Exchange, and we have very clear growth targets. But I think in the midst of that, we still managed to keep that really close tie with the agent community.
So here's a tricky question. Do you think agents regret selling Hemnet?
You have to ask them. We still have our one of our largest shareholders are the agents, so they're still very much part of what we do and have a say in what we do.
Yeah.
And I think the way we work together, so we have the sellers pay for the ads, but there's always an agent in that equation. And we see the agent as a reseller of our business, and we compensate them for that. So that, I think, builds a really strong moat around our business. But it's not a moat that we take for granted. So it is something that we're humble, and we make sure that we keep them very near, both in terms of what they want and how they're involved in what we develop.
So you mentioned this one thing about Sweden that makes it an incredible market for a property portal to be in. The envy of almost every other market around the world, the fact that vendors, homeowners, home sellers pay for the advertising, right? And there's very few markets like that. Sweden, Australia, New Zealand. Do you have any idea why it's that way in Sweden?
I mean, again, I think it's back to, I should be very thankful for back in 1998, how the company was developed from then. And it was a very conscious decision that the seller should pay for this. And part of that cost should go back to the agent.
Yeah.
So this is not something that we could take any credit for in the last few years. This is part of Hemnet's history for sure. And I agree with you. It's an incredible position to be in because we have that connection and contact with the sellers. We talk to them, we influence them, as well as the agent. So we have a very close connection with both of those groups.
Is there anything else interesting or unique about the Swedish market that you think people should know that they might not know about?
Well, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you probably know the other markets much better than I do, but the fact that Hemnet has such a position that we have with 2 million unique visitors a week in a country with, I think it's 5.5 million between the age of 25 and 85. So you can almost not go to a dinner party without Hemnet being brought up. It's part of society. And in addition to that, and I think Hemnet has some credit in that, it's an incredibly liquid market. So it's a very efficient market. You can sell a home in a few weeks. And Hemnet is a lot to thank for that. So we have IKEA, right? And you can almost sell an apartment easier than a Billy the bookcase. And that's very much to the fact that we have such an efficient, open, transparent market.
Yeah. So one of the big things happening right now around the world actually is exclusive inventory or pre-market inventory, like listings for sale that only are available in certain places. So that's what's happening right now in the US in a really big way. And as I've traveled around Europe, we've kind of touched on that over and over again. It just keeps coming up. What does that situation look like here in Sweden?
There's definitely similarities to Sweden. I think if we look back in time, what I've learned is this has been a phenomenon in Sweden as well. It goes up and down during the years, a little bit depending on how the macroeconomic situation looks like. So we have something, we call it a pre-market, and it's where agents very much build their own brand and how the tool they use to get their leads, to get their next property, and how can they match that seller and buyer in a pre-market situation. And we see that it goes up sometimes, it goes down sometimes. What Hemnet believes is this open, transparent marketplace where we can make sure you get a good price for your property. And we did a research very recently that showed that just one more bidder to your property gets you 80,000 Swedish SEK more on average as a price. So I think we also feel very confident by having this open and transparent market. The sellers and the buyers can feel secure that they're paying or they're getting a fair market price.
So how do you reconcile those two things? On the one hand, you're saying, oh, it should be exposed to as many buyers as possible to get the best price. But on the other hand, pre-marketing can be good for home sellers and the agents.
We spend a lot of time thinking about that. And especially, I would say, over the last few months, we're thinking about how can we keep this promise of an open and efficient market, but still recognizing that this is a behavior that's happening, and how could Hemnet facilitate that behavior? So the way we're trying to solve it now is speaking to agents and sellers to understand what role could we have. We do have a pre-market offering. Does that match all the needs that are out there? I don't think so. This is definitely, you asked me in the beginning, what am I spending my time on? This is one of the questions that I think are really interesting. How can we solve for this?
Why is it such a big deal over the past couple months? What's happened?
I think it's a phenomenon that probably becomes more prominent when you see a bit of a downturn in the market. But it's something that we've seen. This 9 out of 10 properties in Sweden tend to sell through Hemnet. That's a number that's been true over the last few years, and that's still the case. So it's not that something's changed. It's just a topic that we're leaning into.
Okay. And what have you learned? What's the number one reason that an agent wants to pre-market, or what's the value to them, and what's the number one value for a homeowner to do that?
I think from an agent perspective, they want to build their brand, right? They want to get that intake. One of the arguments they use when they're out and trying, and we only have exclusive agent deals in Sweden, so you choose one agent, and the one selling argument is that I have a speculant register that is ready for you. So I have a number of buyers that will come immediately to your property. So I think that's one of the arguments from their side, and what we're thinking about there. How could Hemnet offer that type of brand awareness and maybe a closed marketing opportunity that we don't do today? That's certainly an interesting idea.
What about the value to the seller? What's the value in doing pre-marketing to a seller?
Well, I think what Hemnet stands for is we offer this audience, right? So could we in a pre-market offer something else or a more targeted audience? But again, these are questions that we're right now exploring. And I don't think we know the definite answer on how can Hemnet help both the agent and the seller in this. I think we can. What it looks like, we'll see.
Do you spend much time looking overseas to other markets for inspiration?
For sure. We have a team of folks here that are super passionate about Hemnet and the products we build, and they get a lot of inspiration from what's happening in the US, in the UK, I would say, but also Australia. We work with REA, and Rightmove, and of course New Zealand as well, and the European markets. So yes, we take a lot of inspiration. Copy with pride where we can.
Is there an example you could share of where you've been inspired on a particular thing and got smarter by looking at what others are doing?
Yeah, I think we do it. If you look at our products and packaging, you could see some similarities to REA, for example, in Australia for sure. I could also share I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say this, but a bit of a fuck up if I'm humble and share something that we've done where we copied with pride. We copied without localizing it enough, right? So we copied from Rightmove in the UK, a sold by us product. So for agents, how they could advertise the property after it's been sold. And the way we did it didn't land well here. So what we learned from that one is we should definitely continue to take inspiration and seek what others are doing. But we need to also understand how is that going to land with our audiences and adjust and adapt.
Why did that not land well? What was the problem?
We were using the wrong geographical dimensions on it. We were going way too small areas and it wasn't relevant for the audience. So the agents didn't understand, why am I only getting half the city when I want the whole city? And so it was, I think the product in itself is still really relevant and we've adapted it and now it's flying off the shelf, so to say.
Oh, yeah.
But the first iteration was not, and our sales team really tried and tried until we really started listening and understood this we have to just take back and redo.
Is there any other technology you've built or products you've put out there that you were really hopeful they would take off, but they haven't?
Yes, we do them all the time. And I think, honestly, that's a great thing to do and something you should celebrate and talk a lot about. And this is not maybe technology we released that wasn't good enough, but just yesterday we had a release. We changed our experience where you swipe through the pictures instead of clicking through, which is it's a fairly big change from a consumer experience perspective. And yesterday we released to our sellers, how many swipes are they getting? What's the value that we're delivering the sellers? And we were so fast from a product development perspective that we didn't have the time to inform the agents, the sellers, or the rest of our organization. So we're getting a bunch of calls through to customer service that were asking, what the hell is this? And it might not be an example of a product release that wasn't fit for purpose, but it's rather one where we were too fast and we didn't have the go-to-market ready.
If you had to pick one side of that spectrum, what you've just described, move fast and break things, and the other side is, go really slow and talk to our customers and make decisions by consensus. If you had to choose one, which angle would you lean closer to?
So obviously I'm going to say you got to do both and you got to have the muscle to run the marathon and sprint.
Well, that's why I'm saying you got to choose one.
Well, and my personality would definitely lean towards the fast approach. I think as long as we're nimble and we learn quick enough, we will learn so much more by doing more things than doing less things that are perfect.
So you've been here 18 months. What's something you know today that you wish you knew when you started?
One of the humbling experiences is my background's in travel and technology. And I think there I became used to technology being very tech-driven. And you have to be close to your customers, but it's still very technology-driven. I think in property and the business we're in here, what surprised me is how human it is and how the relationships with the agents, understanding how local it is and never losing that perspective in what we do, how important that is. And that's taken me some time and it's taken some tough situations to learn that I also in my position have to be very close to what's happening out there and the relationships we form. There's 7,000 agents in Sweden, so that's not that many. We should have a relationship with each and every one of those. And that's not done through technology. That is done through human interaction. So how can we at Hemnet make sure that we're out there and meeting as many agents as possible to make sure that we stay close to what is it that we're solving for?
So perhaps related to that, what role do you think technology has on an agent's business?
I think we have to ask ourselves, how can we make their lives easier? So what technology could we develop or partner with them that would make their life easier? Because their life is about meeting people. And if you could use technology to get more time or be more efficient, then that's the space we should be in.
Is there anything you're building or thinking about building that's doing that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, data is one of our core assets, I would say, and how can we use that data to make their lives easier? Everything from making their information more informed to making it easier to do evaluation and to get data into the system. So there's a lot of aspects there that we could use.
Okay. If Hemnet theoretically started a venture fund tomorrow and you had $10 million to invest in a company or two in the space, in the real estate tech space in Sweden, what kind of companies would you look for? What problems would they be looking to solve?
Well, I think there's some interesting things in the CRM world that just CRM in itself is not that interesting, but what it enables is super interesting, right? So how can we connect people in a different ways going forward?
Okay. Anything else you want to say on that?
On that VC fund,
Or the CRM? Like, is there an example of how it connects people, or is it just pulling in a lot of data and making an agent's life easier?
I think this whole concept, again, if we go back to pre-market, this in your drawer in the office, you have a bunch of potential buyers that you will match to a listing that you've got in. That is where technology could come in, right? And make that so much better and more efficient. And if I take that back to Hemnet, we have those buyers and we have those sellers. Traditionally, we have matched them on very specific search criteria. So we know exactly the area you want to live in, we know the budget you have and the family situation you have. And we match that with exactly the answer to those questions. I think the role we need to take is, in the era of AI as well, how can we match you with a life that you want? Not based on those specific search criteria that you're used to putting in, but much broader than that. So do you want to live in an area that has certain schools? Or do you want to commute a certain distance? Do you want forest or sea? Well, we have a bunch of areas that could meet those requirements. And that's a change for us. But that's back to the question around technology. That's where technology could really come in, right? And make both the matching experience much better, but also the liquidity in the market, I think, much higher.
As you're saying that, I'm thinking about this problem we have in the US, this last mile problem, which I've talked about before. You can throw all this technology at something, but at the end of the day, you still need an agent to pick up the phone and call someone. And this research I've done, roughly 50% of leads just go unanswered. Do you have the same problem here?
We do, absolutely. I agree with you. Leads are that is the gold in our industry. And how can we make sure that those leads get taken care of? And I know there's some great examples in the US of what has been done to quality assure those leads. It's not an area where I think we've excelled yet. We've integrated with the CRMs. We are talking to the agencies. We're showing the value that we're delivering, but how can we make sure that that's being picked up on the other side of the line or the email? That's definitely something that we need to be mindful of.
Right. There's only so much you can do. At the end of the day, the agent needs to pick up the phone.
Yeah, but I think we should still challenge ourselves to see how can we, again, back to that question, how can we make their life easier?
Well, you get into this tricky scenario where typically the last thing an agent wants is a real estate portal calling their customers.
Yeah, no, exactly.
That's their job.
Yeah.
Right? And real estate agents will defend to the death their right to pay a portal for leads and then ignore those leads because they own them. They're theirs. They would rather do that than have the portal pick up the phone and call those people. So my visit here to Hemnet started very informally. I reached out to somebody and I was going to meet with someone for a quick chat. And it's kind of ballooned to, I feel like I'm meeting half the company after this. Why do you think so many people here are interested in chatting with me? And I don't mean that to make my head big or anything, but there's a curiosity there. So what's driving that?
Other companies so excited to have you here, Mike. The lunch we're having after this, you do have half the company in that room. I think it comes back to your question around, do we look at what our peers are doing? And the folks we have at Hemnet are incredibly, they care so much about the product and they care so much about where we're going and how can we be the best at what we do. And that curiosity is really built into our culture as well. So I think that's what you're seeing and that's what you'll get this afternoon as well. We have a Google Doc with a bunch of questions for you. But there is, the Hemnet culture is unique. I mentioned this before we went into this room. We're small, we're 170 folks in the team. So you should and can know the name of everyone here. It's intricate Swedish in the way that we operate in one market. We have one office where everyone is based, but we have over 20 nationalities. So it's a very diverse culture, which we're very proud of. It's a very inclusive culture. We have 30% of our engineers are female. We have very low attrition rates. So it's, I think, back to the curiosity and the feeling of inclusiveness, that it's just part of what Hemnet is and has been for years, and something that we work on. And it's definitely part of our strategy going forward as well. We don't take it for granted.
You said you've listened to this podcast before?
Yeah.
Is there anyone I've spoken to that you can remember really learning something interesting from?
I listen to your podcast when I run in the morning.
Great.
So I take a lot of learnings. This morning I listened to Lucas from Property Bird in Germany, and I thought he had some really great insights. And he said one thing that really resonated with me, and that was he had spoken to an agent, and that agent it's back to your question around technology and humans and how this business is so local and so people-based. And this agent had told him, I get my leads from my local community. When I go for the run in the morning, when I go for the school run, he mentioned something about the fire brigade. He was part of that. And I think that just symbolizes how and isn't that great? We get to be in a technology business that use, phenomenal technology. We get to try new things, but we still are so reliant on people and connections and interactions. And I think that's interesting. It's the same in whichever country you go to, that is still true. And I think that makes my life much more interesting. And it's why I think I have one of the best jobs.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And I loved that comment from Lucas as well. And it reminds me of this, it's so tricky, and I don't necessarily envy you and anybody in your position talking to real estate agents, because first off, you have to talk to your customers, right? Yeah. You can't not talk to them. You have to talk to them. But part of the challenge with real estate agents is they might not tell you what they actually want or need, or they might not know it.
Yeah.
This happens all the time in the US, where real estate agents are looking to join a particular brokerage, and they're asking the brokerage, do you have this technology? Does the technology do this, that? And they're like, yes, yes, yes. They're like, okay, good. I have to have that to join. And then once they join, they never use it. So there's this idea of what people say they want and what they actually want. And being able to thread the needle on all of that sounds like quite a job.
For sure. It's what makes it interesting too. But I think customers are so core to everything we do, right? So we talk to them every day in different types of settings. And what we've experimented with recently, it's also, we do a lot more what we call smoke tests. So on the site, you will experience, we've just been testing a smoke test for a new payment option where you could delay the payment by a much longer period. We don't have it live, it's not an option, but the option is there to click it, so we can just see what would be the interest if we had this option out there. And that's getting around what you're describing is if you just ask someone, would they like this? You might not get the truth, but if you make them experience it, there you get a different type of behavior. So I think you have to, in all these situations, speak to them, meet them, but also test things in real life. So make them experience something. And that's when you, balancing those things together, you get a good result.
So what do I see if I click that button?
Yeah. So you get to a screen where it says, thank you for sharing with us that you're interested in this. We don't have this functionality yet, but we're evaluating whether it would be interesting. And then we donate 10 crowns to a charity.
Oh, I like that. That's a really cool example.
It guides us a lot in where we focus and what we develop.
Yeah. Okay, great. We're about at time. Any closing thoughts you want to throw out?
Fantastic to have you here. Anytime you want to come back to Stockholm, you're welcome. And I look forward to the session with the team this afternoon.
Awesome. Me too. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mike.
All right. Well, I'm Mike Del Prete. You've been listening to Context. If you want to dig into any more of my research or podcasts or join my mailing list, you can go to my website at mikedp.com. All right. Thanks.